Algeria too harshly conquered, and, as in the case of India, by the English, with more barbarism than civilization. The breach of faith to Abd el-Kader, Blayais, Deutsch bought, Pritchard paid. These are the doings of the reign. The policy which was more domestic than national was the doing of the king. As will be seen, the proper deduction having been made, the king's charge is decreased. This is his great fault. He was modest in the name of France. Whence arises this fault? We will state it. Louis Philippe was rather too much of a paternal king. That incubation of a family with the objection of founding a dynasty is afraid of everything and does not like to be disturbed. Hence excessive timidity, which is displeasing to the people, who have the 14th of July in their civil and Austerlitz in their military traditions. Moreover, if we deduct the public duties which require to be fulfilled first of all, that deep tenderness of Louis Philippe towards his family was deserved by the family. That domestic group was worthy of admiration. Virtues there dwelt side by side with talents. One of Louis Philippe's daughters, Marie d'Orléans, placed the name of her race among artists, as Charles d'Orléans had placed it among poets. She made of her soul a marble which she named Jeanne d'Arc. Two of Louis Philippe's daughters elicited from Metternich this eulogium. They are young people such as are rarely seen, and princes such as are never seen. This without any dissimulation, and also without any exaggeration, is the truth about Louis Philippe. To be Prince Equality, to bear in his own person the contradiction of the Restoration and the Revolution, to have that disquieting side of the revolutionary which becomes reassuring in governing power, therein lay the fortune of Louis Philippe in 1830. Never was there a more complete adaptation of a man to an event. The one entered into the other, and the incarnation took place. Louis Philippe is 1830 made man. Moreover, he had in his favor that great recommendation to the throne, exile. He had been proscribed, a wanderer, poor. He had lived by his own labor. In Switzerland, this heir to the richest princely domains in France had sold an old horse in order to obtain bread. At Reichenau, he gave lessons in mathematics, while his sister Adelaide did wool work and sewed. These souvenirs connected with a king rendered the bourgeoisie enthusiastic. He had with his own hands demolished the iron cage of Mont Saint-Maquille, built by Louis XI and used by Louis XV. He was the companion of Dumouriez. He was the friend of Lafayette. He had belonged to the Jacobins' Club. Mirabeau had slapped him on the shoulder. Danton had said to him, "Young man." At the age of 24, in '93, being then Monsieur de Chartres, he had witnessed from the depth of a box the trial of Louis XVI, so well named, that poor tyrant. The blind clairvoyance of the Revolution, breaking royalty in the king and the king with royalty, did so almost without noticing the man in the fierce crushing of the idea, the vast storm of the Assembly tribunal, the public wrath interrogating Carpe, not knowing what to reply, the alarming stupefied vacillation by the royal head beneath that sombre breath, the relative innocence of all in that catastrophe of those who condemned as well as of the man condemned. He had looked on those things. He had contemplated that giddiness. He had seen the centuries appear before the bar of the Assembly Convention. He had beheld behind Louis XVI that unfortunate passer-by who was made responsible, the terrible culprit, the monarchy, rise through the shadows, and there had lingered in his soul the respectful fear of these immense justices of the populace, which are almost as impersonal as the justice of God. The trace left in him by the Revolution was prodigious. Its memory was like a living imprint of those great years, minute by minute. One day, in the presence of a witness whom we are not permitted to doubt, he rectified from memory the whole of the letter A in the alphabetical list of the Constituent Assembly. Louis Philippe was a king of the broad daylight. While he reigned, the press was free, the tribune was free, conscience and speech were free. The laws of September are open to sight. Although fully aware of the gnawing power of light on privileges, he left his throne exposed to the light. History will do justice to him for this loyalty. Louis Philippe, like all historical men who have passed from the scene, is today put on trial by the human conscience. His case is as yet only in the lower court. The hour when history speaks with its free and venerable accent has not yet sounded for him. The moment has not come to pronounce a definite judgment on this king. The austere and illustrious historian, Louis Blanc, has himself recently softened his first verdict. Louis Philippe was elected by those two almosts which are called the 221 and 1830, that is to say, by a half parliament and a half revolution. And in any case, from the superior point of view where philosophy must place itself, we cannot judge him here, as the reader has seen above, except with certain reservations in the name of the absolute democratic principle. In the eyes of the absolute, outside these two rights, the right of man in the first place, and the right of the people in the second, all is usurpation. But what we can say, even at the present day, that after making these reserves, is, that to sum up the whole, and in whatever manner he is considered, Louis Philippe, taken in himself, and from the point of view of human goodness, will remain, to use the antique language of ancient history, one of the best princes who ever sat on a throne. What is there against him? That throne. Take away Louis Philippe the king, there remains the man, and the man is good. He is good at times, even to the point of being admirable. Often, in the midst of his greatest souvenirs, after a day of conflict with the whole diplomacy of the continent, he returned at night to his apartments, and there, exhausted with fatigue, overwhelmed with sleep, what did he do? He took a death sentence and passed the night in revising a criminal suit, considering it something to hold his own against Europe, but that it was a still greater matter to rescue a man from the executioner. He obstinately maintained his opinion against his keeper of the seals. He disputed the ground with the guillotine foot by foot against the crown attorneys, those chatterers of the law, as he called them. Sometimes the pile of sentences covered his table. He examined them all. It was anguish to him to abandon these miserable, condemned heads. One day he said to the same witness to whom we have recently referred, "I won 7 last night." During the early years of his reign, the death penalty was as good as abolished, and the erection of a scaffold was a violence committed against the king. The Greve having disappeared with the elder branch, a bourgeois place of execution was instituted under the name of the Barrière Saint-Jacques. Practical men felt the necessity of a quasi-legitimate guillotine, and this was one of the victories of Casimir Perier, who represented the narrow sides of the bourgeoisie, over Louis Philippe, who represented its liberal sides. Louis Philippe annotated Beccaria with his own hand. After the Fieschi machine, he exclaimed, "What a pity that I was not wounded! Then I might have pardoned." On another occasion, alluding to the resistance offered by his ministry, he wrote in connection with a political criminal, who is one of the most generous figures of our day, "His pardon is granted. It only remains for me to obtain it." Louis Philippe was as gentle as Louis IX, and as kindly as Henry IV. Now, to our mind in history, where kindness is the rarest of pearls, the man who is kindly almost takes precedence of the man who is great. Louis Philippe, having been severely judged by some, harshly perhaps by others, it is quite natural that a man, himself a phantom at the present day, who knew that king, should come and testify in his favor before history. This deposition, whatever else it may be, is evidently and above all things entirely disinterested,